Hello, I'm Novelette and welcome to Morgen Talk. My guest today is Crystal West, realtor, broker owner of WestCity Realty and Lending Services. Crystal, who is a proud Howard University School of Business graduate, was motivated to earn her lending license after seeing the disparities of how her own people were being treated in her community. Please help me in welcoming Ms. Crystal West. Hi, Crystal. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Novelette?
Quite well, thank you. Thanks so much for talking with us today.
It is my pleasure.
Thank you. So, Crystal, how do you describe affordable homes?
The one's ability to pay. And affordable housing goes with your income and what you can afford to pay, in addition to all of your other debts and needs.
In the South Bay market for some time now, I would say the last few years, finding affordable homes here has been quite of a challenge. What is your take on that?
It's California. Everyone wants to live here, the Golden State. The weather, the stars, the golden opportunities. But we do not have a sustainable market where people can make the income to live here. I've talked with many people who own properties in Manhattan Beach, PV, Inglewood. Such a big contrast in the past, but individuals tell me all the time, if I had not owned here or had I not inherited this property from a family member, there's no way that I can afford to be here. So that's one of the biggest things. It's the popularity of the state, the opportunities that people believe when they're coming here. But California has moved in becoming a service state. The first time I ever heard that was from my dad. My dad worked for McDonnell Douglas, Boeing, as it continued to evolve over the years, which no longer is here in Southern California. It's a staple of Long Beach. So that particular entity where there was a lot of manufacturing going on of planes right here in Southern California no longer exists. But housing and the desire to live here, of course, never changed. So it's affordability factor. You have individuals who are living here for the first time, and they don't have the income to support the economic market, then of course you just don't have it. It's a very big disparity.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. What is your take on redlining? Do you think it still exists?
Absolutely. I see that for what happened in Long Island, New York, where a real estate office was purposely steering individuals of African American and Latino descent away from a particular neighborhood. The case that happened in Florida, where a Black woman and her white husband had an appraisal done on their property. I think they were in the middle of a refinance. And the appraiser, when the wife was there, the appraiser came in and they gave them an appraisal amount of less than $100,000. It was $100,000 less. I can't remember the exact number, but the bank was very disturbed at how low the appraisal came back in. So they ordered another appraisal. But this time, the wife and the son left, and the husband was there. And so what they went a step further and removed her pictures and their wedding pictures off, so it was just him and his family. And the appraisal came in over $100,000. This is within weeks that this appraisal took place. So I see that with even in the lending business, where lenders at one time, and that's one of the reasons why they have all these laws in place for fair housing, where you were lending predatorily in an area that favored more African American or maybe more Latino residents as opposed to a white neighborhood. So those individuals had higher interest rates next to their neighbors that were all white, which had a lower interest amount. I've seen that even in programs that are now out with like PACE. PACE is a program that I believe preys on the African American community. I've seen it in Inglewood. I've had other conversations with individuals who really didn't understand, because the PACE program has no accountability to APR. They don't even disclose what the interest amount is that a person is paying to be in the PACE program. And they tell people you don't have to worry about your credit because we're not running that. They use the equity of the property. They tell you that your mortgage is not going to change, which is true. They don't touch the principal and interest of the mortgage, but they touch your taxes, your property tax. So it's assessed with the LA County Tax Assessor's Office, which is something you can never avoid. So there's no way to bankrupt yourself out of or do something where they have to realign the amount, because the county assessor's office has nothing to do with that, and they attack it against the taxes. So what ended up happening is that no, your mortgage payment wasn't touched, but you come with this big, huge tax bill that people didn't expect. And with that tax bill, people ended up, I can't afford to pay the property taxes, so they ended up losing their home or being forced to sell. So this was a point of keeping up with the Joneses in a program that did not have to disclose APR or truly disclose how it worked, because they would say there's a bump in your property taxes. I personally refinanced someone who had just gotten the PACE program for solar power. And when she told me this, I said, stop it. I said, don't do it. And she was like, it's too late. And in that span of time of me refinancing her to get her out of it, because she would have never been able to afford the property taxes in addition to what she was paying, PACE had already taken $10,000 of her equity that we could not get back. So it's that things like that, those type of programs, appraisals, the steering away from certain neighborhoods, redlining is very, very, very prevalent today. And even I still hear about PACE programs on radio stations, urban radio stations here in Los Angeles. They're still doing the commercials, and I just don't believe or understand why our state officials would allow something like that, particularly with the Los Angeles Property Tax Assessor's Office. Property taxes have to be paid, and people cannot avoid it. Once you lose that 5 years, they come in and auction your property.
Wow, that's disturbing to hear, especially we're coming up now on 53 years after fair housing.
Absolutely.
Still this.
And it has been very difficult. And the further that we move into this, it's very difficult to become a homeowner. In California, period. The property values in Oakland, which is an urban area, has skyrocketed. And people who have lived there for 30, 40 years, and they live there as renters, can't even afford to buy. And they're being pushed out because the individuals who own the properties are like, market value is better, or I want to sell my home because I can get too much for it, and it's better than just having you there as a renter paying a low rental amount. So it's happening in Oakland, it's happening in San Diego, it's happening, of course, San Francisco is ridiculous. Who had thought that there would be some place that was even more crazy than California, Los Angeles?
Measure H, that was created roughly 4 or 5 years ago as a complement to Proposition HHH, I believe 2016. And the idea behind Measure H was to add a quarter of a cent tax to help build homes for the homeless. Do you think that's worked?
Not at all. I think that, and this is pre-pandemic, our homeless rate has quadrupled. I recently looked at at data from 2020. This was June 2020, which was a very difficult time to assess what the homelessness situation was because of the pandemic. But the count showed a 12.7% rise in homelessness. It is continued, and we don't know what has happened since that time, since that first count. And that was just the study that came out, and I believe that count took place in October of 2019. I unfortunately, I say unfortunate because it is such an eye-opening situation, participated in a count in LA. And to see people's their stories, to see, people living on the streets and not being able to have the decency of just having access to a bathroom is ridiculous. And it, even prior to our current pandemic, the pandemic was going to happen. It was just something it wasn't about a matter of if, it was a matter of when. And I think that our pandemic situation is not over by a long shot, because as long as we have people living on the streets in an unhealthy manner, it is something that not only threatens their life, but the livelihood of those of us that are in homes. So it's going to have a major domino effect until we get a grip on homelessness. I believe that we are at a state where no one knows what to do. So measure H, I believe, was to that 1.14% tax was to revenue, to create a revenue of $1.2 billion, to go up towards 10,000, I think it was up to 10,000 units, to help individuals who were families and individuals heading into homelessness, to create those units to help support them. But it's more to it than just putting someone in 4 walls. We have mental incapability, we have individual loneliness, depression, illness. All of these factors have put a lot of people on the streets. There's a lot of individuals living in cars. Point taken. I had an experience once. I went to Costco, and during the time pre-pandemic, of course, I met this gentleman who was doing the tastings with chocolates. I just wanted a chocolate. So I asked him, is it okay if I grab one? And he said, I am so glad that you asked. He says, you have no idea. And he just finished having a full conversation with me about the individuals at Costco and how rude they were. And he said, I'm going to write a book one day. And then he went on to tell me that he lived in his car. He said he was homeless. I would have never expected this conversation with someone, just because I wanted a piece of chocolate. And he said that he lived in his car. He had lost his home. He stayed with his mother. It was his mother's house. Well, they had did a reverse mortgage. They really truly didn't understand the whole process of how the reverse mortgage worked. And of course, after his mom passed away, a family member has only a year to either cure the loan, sell the home. He had no idea what to do. The next thing he knows is that the bank has put it on foreclosure and he has to move out. So he didn't even get the opportunity to understand, listen, your mom has passed away. You may want to think about selling this if you cannot refinance and have a loan. And this gentleman is a working individual, and he's working, and his biggest thing was, if I could just, he says, I look forward to the day when I could live in an apartment, just something, he says, just to have a roof over my head. But this is a working individual, a stable individual. So affordable housing for these individuals, it's immediate. We can immediately put them in housing. But our individuals that are mentally unable to be in 4 walls, our individuals who are on drugs, who are unable to be in these 4 walls, those are things that we have to create, not just housing, but we have to create an institution that's going to give them an opportunity to be able to transition back into the real world, because they're not holding jobs. And it's more than just taking someone off the streets. One size does not fit all. We have to have some balance. It can't just be affordable housing. It has to be affordable home ownership. There are a lot of kids that have very decent incomes that should have an opportunity to purchase a home as a first-time home buyer. And a lot of these funds from Measure H can be used as down payment towards them getting funding. Here in Long Beach, California, they had a project that was of the Olive Court project. The Olive Court project was for first-time home buyers. It was a condo townhome mesh, I should say, of different entities for people to come in and purchase. So you had your single flat condo, you had your 2-level townhome. In some cases, some of them were 3 levels because there were 2 bedrooms, 1 bedroom, 4 bedrooms. What the city did was they offered $130,000 grant towards the purchase of this property. $1,500 would be forgiven over time. And that $130,000 grant, and I may have the numbers mixed up, so if anyone's out there wondering exactly where we are, but if the property was $430,000, the individual was able to purchase it at $300,000. So with that $300,000, that's where their property tax base was based. With that property tax base, it made it more affordable for them to have the mortgage, the interest, the property taxes, and the insurance. And they did this in conjunction. This grant from the city was in conjunction with Bank of America. So over time, part of that of those funds were forgiven. So the longer the person stayed, the more was forgiven off of their loan. Now, mind you, I'm talking about one person who I know personally that was able to obtain a property in Alport. So their property tax base was based on that $300,000, starting off at $2,625 a year. So it made it very affordable for them. If you were to build a building, just say for $10 million, that's a 55-unit project. So, and we're talking about in that space of a 2-bedroom. You know, of course, the more the property was, the bigger the property tax base, the 1.25%. So we're going to do the math right here because math tells no lies. So if you're building a property for $10 million of 55 units, that $10 million apartment building is going to yield the city $125,000 per year for taxes. Now, if we average out what happened over at Alport, and this is just an average, because remember, as I said, some were higher and some were lower, depending on the family that was purchased. So if you take and you say 55 units and you go all the way across and you say that it's $2,625 per unit, well, that's $144,375 per year that's generated in property tax. So if you take $125,000 and $144,375, that's about a difference of $19,000. Well, property taxes, 50% of it is supposed to go towards our schools. And every year, you know, property taxes go up by 2%. Now, if you have individuals who are renting, those property taxes are going to stay stable from $125,000 per year, and it's only going to grow that way. If you have home ownership and property taxes as people are selling and moving and making those sales, the property tax base continues to go up, or it changes different. So this property had more potential of giving more than $144,000 a year. That money goes based to the schools. When you have money that's going to schools, of course, you have better school districts. If you look at what a rental school district is, redlining, if you look at where renters are, the school districts aren't as great as opposed to places where people own, like Cerritos, the ABC school district. It makes a difference. Home ownership is necessary. Even if you do it on a moderate to low income opportunity, you have individuals who are now invested, not just in their home, but in the city and the state. It makes a difference. And we really can't just do affordable housing. We also have to do affordable home ownership. And that we need balance. If we don't have balance, if you have too many poor people in a neighborhood or too many poor people in a city, more importantly, too many poor people in a state, you're never going to get ahead. That's why the middle class needs to exist. If we have more have-nots and haves to the have-nots, it's just not going to provide the necessary balance that we need. And property taxes take care of not just our schools, but our police department, our fire department, our county hospitals, these are things that need to happen. And all of that starts with home ownership.
That's true. That is true. Thank you so much for talking with us today.
I truly appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.